Joseph Muler Brochmann was actually born Joseph Muller, and he was born in Switzerland in 1914. Later, he married violinist Verena Brochmann, and he assumed her name, so he became Joseph Muler Brochmann. He was very influential in the Swiss style, and his philosophy was all about order and refinement. So he's a very interesting designer because his process became a global process in design. This is one of my favorite posters by him. And this particular poster was designed for the Swiss Auto Club. And you can see how that really large photograph, really playing with scale there, is amplifying the text on the side. You can also see how this hand is very friendly, and it's supposed to signify how it will protect you from accidents. Notice the red cars. Brochmann always used a really limited color palette where he thought about color, was very precise in where he placed color within the space. Another design, this one is it's a public awareness poster, and the type is saying less noise, and you can see that discomfort and that agitation in the graphic. Very appropriate. Brochmann published and wrote several books. His most famous is a book called Grid Systems in Graphic Design. And this book became a really influential textbook for many designers. And it's very beautiful. If you ever get a chance to see one in person, it's all about the grid. He shows a lot of his work. He talks about how he lays it out with the grid in the background, and he talks about how important this process is. And his real belief was that you could never learn to become an artist necessarily, but you could always learn to become a good graphic artist by following specific principles. He designed a series of posters for this Zurich Town Hall Theater productions, and this series became really widely seen and celebrated for the clean aesthetic, the limited use of color, the layout. And one thing about Brochmann's work is it feels very current, even today. I mean, this particular design was done, in like the 1960s, I believe, and it feels just like you could see it today, and you would still look at it and be engaged with it. I like this design because he actually brought the grid in as a graphic, and the grid is such an important part of his work that it's very appropriate. So you can see how when he laid things out, he always thought about this grid structure and where they were in relation to each other. This Akari design was it was a poster for an exhibition of lamps, and these modulated glowing multicolored discs are really signifying radiant energy of lighting fixtures. So you can see how he thought about the colors and he thought about his graphics in terms of the meaning. But he also felt that design should not be personal, and that designer feelings should be relevant. They were subjective, and designer feelings were often used to persuade the audience, and he felt that you should be neutral and objective, impersonal, and that you should think about this process in terms of what you were communicating and try and keep your own personal feelings out of the process. And so that was kind of revolutionary in some ways. It really brought this whole art of design into a real formulaic method where you could learn it and do it and create very good visual communication. He studied architecture, design, and art history, and he was very passionate about illustration as well. He actually was an illustrator in his 20s, but when he turned 30, he decided that he really was never going to be a great illustrator and that he would dedicate his life to layout and design because he felt that's where he could have the most impact. So this idea of absolute and universal graphic expression through an objective and impersonal presentation, uh, really giving you the ability to communicate effectively to the audience. Kind of reminds me a little bit, I always like to use the analogy of the newspaper reporter. The newspaper reporter is supposed to report the story, give you the information, write well, but they're not supposed to bring their own feelings and opinions in to the story. So in this particular design, he used, you can see this very simple color. It's very geometric. He often would slant the text and think about the text's relationship to the graphics or to the photograph. And so these colored squares are kind of marching in this musical rhythm. They're on this tilted white diamond, and the typography and shapes really align in this harmonious juxtaposition in this design. Love this one too. It has such visual impact. So this simple black and white photograph of a cow, desaturated, placed back into the space, using a very simple color scheme, very dramatic, elegant, communicates the message in a very simple, straightforward way. So you can see this real geometric pattern going on with his work and how he laid out the text and how he thought about the graphic. There was always a real significant relationship. You can see some of the influence of his background in illustration in this particular design, but he actually took these little squiggly graphics and then he chopped them up and he placed them back into a grid format with these squares. So this is just and just a visual of his grid system and how he's thinking about laying out the text on these lines. So your next project is actually going to be a postcard, and you're going to be designing a postcard for an exhibition on Joseph Muler Brochmann's work. So hopefully this lecture helps you understand who he is and what he contributed to design. You can see just so simple, these giant circles that kind of decline in scale, giving this real dramatic perspective, making us feel like those circles are just kind of going into space here. And then the text cleanly laid out in columns. Also notice that he often went off the edge of the frame, creating these really dynamic cropping. Here's a picture from his book. And what's nice about the book is they actually put the grid in some of the areas so you can kind of see how he designed it and see where he was thinking in terms of the grid relationship. This was just a simple American Books Today, but I put it in here because it's so appropriate and it really kind of communicates about his process. So he's thinking America, he's thinking books, and so he just has this really simple shapes to signify the pages of the book, abstracted shapes almost, and then the colors signify the American flag. It was that simple. He put a few stars in there, laid the text in, but it's really about communication, it's about abstraction, it's about simplicity. Another beautiful design. Love the colors. He kind of blurred them out. Just beautiful layout, really make us look at the design. So think about this postcard, think about who Joseph Muler Brochmann was, and think about the style that he would design with. And that's how I want you to approach this project. It's a fun project, and so I'm excited to see what you guys come up with.